Welcome back to
Merendiando,
part of Radio Aluna Theatre.
To kick off Season 7, we have the talented, award-winning director, actor, writer, and dramaturg Soheil Parsa.
Soheil Parsa is a co-founder and former artistic director of Modern Times Stage Company, with a career that spans 32 years and 2 continents.
His work has been recognized with numerous awards and nominations, celebrating his unique contribution to Canadian theatre.
He is also the director of Aluna Theatre and Modern Times' upcoming production of The House of Bernarda Alba.
In this episode, we chat with Soheil about some of the questions that have fueled his work over the years, his philosophies around theatre directing, and how Lorca's work is inspiring him.
Let's get started.
Welcome to the podcast, Soheil.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. I'm quite excited about this interview, this conversation. I call it a conversation, not an interview.
Yes, absolutely. Right. It's very exciting to have you. Let's just dive right in. Soheil, when did you know that you were a director?
Wow, that's a great question. I was an actor by training back in Iran before I left my homeland. So it was here in Canada that I realized acting seems unlikely for me, given my new challenge of speaking a second language. So I gravitated towards directing in Canada because that was perhaps it was a very realistic decision because I had a heavy accent. I barely spoke English when I came to this country in 1984. So since I love theater, I decided that if not acting, I would do something else. And I remember at York University when I was auditioning to get into New York, to get enrolled at York University. They said, because of your accent and, do you think it's going to be some possibilities for you in the future? I said, I love theater. If not acting, I could be a good stage manager maybe, and possibly a director. So that was it. That was there, and I think it was in my second year at York, I directed a show, a Bertolt Brecht's piece, A Man's a Man, with the student, the second year student in acting, all my friends those days, they were all my friends. And there I really got fascinated with directing. And then I realized, okay, that's my destiny. That's my direction, to be a director. So it was in 1987 that 1987, that's right, that I decided that would be my future.
It's taken you this far.
When was the first time you encountered Lorca, the writer, and what attracted you to his work?
Wow, yeah, my love for Lorca's plays and poetry goes back to mid-20s, mid-70s, 20s, imagine. Mid-70s
Your 20s,
when I was...
Yeah,
in my 20s. Yeah, in mid-70s when I was a theater student at Tehran University. There that, we had the translations of the 3 major tragedies, of course. Like that was the first thing that the first translation we received from Lorca, A Blood Wedding, The House of Bernarda Alba, and Yerma. So there I got fascinated with this amazing and remarkable playwright. And I fell in love with him and his universe. Look, the theme and the universe of Lorca has always fascinated me. His vast artistic imagination, his unique theatrical style that confronts naturalism, and his compelling, remarkable female characters has always fascinated me. So that was a place that, like back home in Iran, I got familiar with him. And I always wanted, as an actor, I wanted to play in his, to be an actor in one of his plays. I wanted to play Leonardo when I was younger, but I never got a chance to play that part. So when I came to Canada, I was seriously thinking since 1989, I co-founded Modern Times Stage Company. I was dreaming to do the 3 tragedies, the 3 plays, major tragedies by Lorca. So I've managed to do Blood Wedding, and this is The House of Bernarda Alba, and hopefully in the future I would do Yerma, I hope.
Wow. That's amazing. It's been in your heart for
for
years, germinating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As I say, like is there like a lot of like a strong connection in the Iranian community, in the Iranian artistic community with Lorca. It's very close to the Iranian culture, like the whole concept,
Mm.
the poetic aspect of his work is really like, it's fascinating to many Iranians and Iranian artists. So yeah, it goes back about
Wow.
around like I would say 45 years that I know Lorca. Yeah.
And can I ask you a follow-up to that? Like, what is similar, do you see, like in the Iranian culture that you just described and the universe of Lorca? Like, what is a similarity, an example of a similarity?
Uh, that's interesting. But first of all, like, Persian language, Farsi, they call it
Mhm.
Farsi or Persian, is extremely poetic. So the first thing that happened, like the translation of Lorca's poems by one of the greatest poets of Iran, because he knew like Spanish, English, and German. So the first translation of his poems happened by this Iranian poet, and it was like fascinating. Everybody's noticed a lot of similarities in terms of imagery, in terms of like, what do you call it? Even culturally, I found it like, they found it a lot of similarities. And both Blood Wedding and House of Bernarda Alba, these two plays that, that I've been working on, it is like you associate a lot with the oppression of women, about the society, the societal law, and what is happening, what is happening in Spain in those days and what was happening in Iran. There was a lot of similarities, especially about like,
Mm.
the women's character and the struggles that the female characters are going through. There's a lot of similarities between like the Iranian society and the Spanish society at the time of Lorca those days in the early
Mm.
20th century.
Yeah, that's beautiful. In a previous interview, you have said that there is a great tradition of translation in Iran, and you mentioned that like when you first encountered Lorca, it was through these really great translations that you really connected with. So I'm just wondering, what do you mean by that? Like this great tradition of translation? I'd love to hear more. Anything you have to share about that?
Yeah, like, what I mean by the great tradition of translation, most of the important Western plays by the Western playwrights have been translated into Farsi, including Lorca. So from Shakespeare to like, like a classics like Shakespeare and Moliere, comes to the contemporary 20th century playwrights like, Beckett, UNESCO, Harold Pinter, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, as an example. Lorca, it's been translated like, vastly, like not just like, one or two translation. For example, the translation of the House of Bernarda Alba, at least we have like 5 different translations of this play by 5 different
Mm.
translators, each a bit different. Everybody has a different approach.
Mm.
So yeah, exactly. Like, when we look at the translation of House of Bernarda Alba in English, we have at least like 5-6 different translations. Same thing is happening in Iran. So that's what I meant by it's a great tradition of translations that's been like, a long tradition. So that's what I meant by it. Yeah, we have almost translation of every single important plays of Western society, of the Western
Mm.
genre.
Wow, that's amazing. And now that we know that you love the trilogy, why did you choose to present the House of Bernarda Alba this time?
That's a great question. As I said, like, I've been fascinated by the universe and the themes of Garcia Lorca, but particularly in the House of Bernarda Alba, I think Lorca explores the force of oppression. He explores the conflict between individual freedom, individual desires, and societal conventions and conformity. That's these things that always fascinated me, this concept. He also like explored the clash between modernity and tradition. and explores the destructive nature of the decaying traditions. I think that's so important.
Mm-hmm.
And that's again, like that what I connect with Lorca as an Iranian born theater artist, because exactly like what is happening in my country is a struggle between the modernity and tradition. And I think this is it's a very important concept. It's a very important theme in most of like Lorca's plays, that all these things, this is happening in this, it belongs to dated traditions.
Right.
And Lorca himself was as a victim of that deadly and decayed traditions as being a homosexual. He had to fight, he had to just confronted that society constantly, because it's his time that it wasn't accepted at all. The societal law and is amazing how it prevents the freedom of individual. That's something really fascinates me about both like Bloodwedding and how the House of Bernarda Alba.
If I understand correctly, he wrote these on the precipice of the Civil War in Spain.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's such a potent time.
Yeah. It was 6 months after he wrote the piece, he was executed. He was assassinated basically by the Francos, the right-wing, regime. And so at the same time, I think in the House of Bernarda Alba, we notice it's kind of foreshadowing the appearance of fascism. What is happening in that household with Bernarda, it is a fascist. It's a fascism. It's like, and he's kind of, because, when I think about it, like fascism, like, Nazism, and there's all these like stupid like things that are happening around the world. These leaders don't fall from the sky. It's been created by us, by the people, by the society. And I think that was, you could see in that household, the way Bernarda Alba manages and tries to control the sexuality of their daughters, the freedom of their who they are. And then you say, I think Lorca was anticipating, foreshadowing the appearance of fascism. That's what I think.
Wow. Juicy. In your history of work and in this production, a beautiful, unique characteristic of your body of work is that you work with actors of all different backgrounds and welcome intercultural just experience into your shows. And we're really interested on how you build semiotics into your work. Semiotics, from what we understand, is creating meanings beyond the verbal, like the nonverbal aspect of theater. And I'm just wondering, what is your definition of semiotics, and what's the process like of building it in your work? I know that's a huge question, but it just seems like so important. It seems like such a Soheil thing.
Yes, it is, But thank you. It's a great question. Is that we can talk about semiotics for hours, of course.
Yeah.
It's such a interesting and sophisticated concept in the world of the theater. Yeah, theater semiotics is basically is a mythology that considers performance as a system of sign that creates meaning. That everything that happens during the performance is a signifier, and it's used to express a particular concept by the director or even by the playwright, because sometimes semiotics could be linguistic as well. So basically, everything can be treated as a sign in theater, in the staging, including costumes, props, sets, lights, space or venue, and even the bodies and movement of the actors. They could be a part of the semiotic, because we are creating a sign, sometimes, focusing in one subject, one object even, and seeing the transformation of that object to something else. That's part of the semiotics. That's the way semiotic works. So basically, in semiotics, in the world of semiotics, it is like one object that doesn't, for example, a glass of water is not just a glass of water. It could be something else. For example, I give you an idea about this, that you have this glass of water on the table. Then the lighting designers give you like a shaft of light, like a specific isolation of that glass of water. And imagine one of the characters who's looking at the glass of water, that he or she could remember something, a memory, and they could hear the sound of the ocean, the sound of the waves, and all of a sudden, like that glass of water can transfer to an ocean. That's something, that's a part of an example of semiotics, because that's a sign. Is not this the glass of water is not necessarily always a glass of water. It's a glass of water, and it is something else as well. Give you another example. I think what is interesting in the semiotics, it's about the transformational qualities of an object or of a sound or an image that is open to different interpretation by the spectators. Because that's something, again, in semiotics is interesting. The receivers, the audience, each may have a different interpretation of a moment that's happening on a stage. And I think it's not a single interpretation. As I said, like a glass of water could change to something else. I give you another example of my past production. It might be a little bit interesting. It was in 1999, I directed Hamlet, my version of Hamlet. It was interesting. My perception of Ophelia, I had always Ophelia with a red rose attached to her head, to her hair actually. And it was interesting after she died. In my version, we buried in the funeral, we buried the red rose. And Ophelia herself was a part of the procession in her own funeral. So in the stuff like burying literally the body of a person, we buried the flower, which, had a different meanings and different interpretation for the audience, for the receivers, for the spectators. So I think I give you two examples of how you can treat, what is that, it is called semiotics. It allows you to look at an object, look at listen to a sound, or see an image differently, because it's always has a transformational qualities that could move and go to something else and become something else. This is, I hope that I've been able to explain it a little bit to you, but this is what I see in theater. And I think this is, as I said, for example, like a glass of water can present a sea, or a scarf can present a soul. A shriek of a horse can present death, and the sound of breaking glass can represent a violent act. And repetition of it, just you have the breaking, the sound of the breaking glass a few times throughout your production. The first time the audience associated with the death of a character. Second time, even you don't show that moment. You don't show that, that another person is dying. Just the audience hear the sound of the breaking glass. They realize, okay, somebody else is dying, or somebody else is killed, is being killed. So this is what I mean by it, that it creates different meanings, bring other layers to a production, which goes beyond naturalism. I hope that I've been able to explain a little bit the concept of semiotics in theater.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
I was thinking, I think about the semiotics in life. It's like how you're saying, it's like when I was a kid, if I heard the door open after 6, I knew my dad is coming home. So I already know that the door means...
That's a sign. That's right, exactly.
Yeah, something like that. So it's something that we are kind of accustomed as humans, and then we see it in theater. It creates that bond of, we're in it, we know, we feel it.
That's right. And what is so interesting about it is not intellectual. Immediately you realize you connect with it. Yes. And create a story at the moment. Yes. And that's the other thing, the question I think that you had, in what happens in House of Bernarda Alba. To be honest, I haven't decided, because it's not an intellectual decision. That I know I'm going to use semiotics. This is my second nature. And I think what happens in the process. When I have full participation of my sound designer and my lighting designer, everybody there, then, I start playing with this, and it's very unconscious. Sometimes I create something, and some people who are familiar with the semiotics, I said, that's very semiotic what you did. I said, really? I don't know. Is it? Yeah, because again, I don't think about it. So it's not something I plan before I go to the rehearsal process. As I said, the idea of a flower, the red rose for Ophelia, it was just all happened in magical moment in the rehearsal process. We were just playing with it. Then all of a sudden I said, what about Ophelia has always been represented by a red flower, and now if she doesn't exist, what will happen? It was interesting that later on in the production we saw Hamlet holding a red rose and looking at it like this. Okay, yeah, this is it really was meaningful. It was a really beautiful moment that without adding anything to the text or just like a visual element, that audience can connect and follow the story differently.
Mm-hmm. There's something very I love how it's using intuition and like the mythology that you bring with you, like as an artist, like the material that you bring, and your use of the word mythology, like you're creating the mythology of the world of the piece, which is so sensual.
Thank you. Yeah.
Are there any artists or pieces or things you look to when you're looking for inspiration? Maybe not, because you say it's intuitive, so it's not necessarily something you're consciously sort of trying to study, but is there any teachers of yours that have really influenced you in that direction or inspired you?
Unfortunately, no. I've never had the opportunity to have a mentor in my life. Never had it, because I was in a state of transition, fleeing my own country, my homeland, coming to this country. When I got here, I was a bit like older than usual at the theater. As a theater at York, I was like in my 30s, like early 30s, and everybody was in their early 20s or late the teenager days. So it was interesting. I never got the chance to have a mentor, to work directly or get influenced by a mentor. But what happened? I studied a lot. I read a lot. It's called the School of Prague. The semiotic is rooted in constructionalism. Bertolt Brecht and Meyerhold, these two famous avant-garde theater directors, were strongly influenced by semiotics. You see elements of semiotics definitely in Brecht and Meyerhold, definitely. So by studying and reading a lot, because as I said, I did get a chance to have a mentor, that I just tried to read as much as I could, and I learned a lot by reading about semiotics. Yeah.
I think also the fact that you were mentioning so much of the poetry that you find on the page besides the play, it's like a lot of information, like all the poetry that you find in the thing that it's not translated visually, you have translated, adapted visually.
Absolutely. And I think that's it. I remember, especially when I was directing Blood Wedding, I was reading constantly Lorca's poetry. It was not connected to the piece, but I needed to read and understand his universe. Mm-hmm. And the whole concept of the horses, the image of horses constantly, in most of his poetry, horses, they're there, they exist, and the concept of death is death is everywhere in Lorca's play, as if he was foreshadowing his own death as well. He was very young that he was executed by the Franco regime. So you're right. A lot of those elements, the semiotic elements, the signs and ideas coming from his poetry. Yeah.
So rich, the world. We read a really beautiful article in Intermission magazine, which had some amazing pictures, Soheil. Oh my gosh. Please, anyone who wants to see some amazing pictures of Soheil's cat, please check out the Intermission article. And in that article, you said that your current dream is to work as a freelance director. What kind of projects would you like to work on now that you're a freelance director?
There are many plays that I've been dreaming to direct, in the past 32 years when I was at the AD, Artistic Director of Modern Times. But of course, at Modern Times, for budgetary restriction, I was limited to one production a year. So I couldn't do more than one production a year. And while I had all these ideas, all these plays in my head that I wanted to direct, as I said, like, I couldn't just do one Lorca 1 year, like, and then because it's like a big cast, it would have been very expensive for the company, small company, to constantly, produce like big show, like big cast, productions. So that's why I have a lot of ideas. I have a lot of plays that I would love to direct. So I hope I would get the chance to direct some of my dream plays and dream projects in other theater in this city, in this and other cities in this country. I think I would like to offer a different look at the classics. I love the classics. I grew up with the classics. I'm fascinated by the classics. And so, that's my dream. Hopefully, I'll get this opportunity to direct for other theaters in this country.
Amazing. Well, I can't wait to see it. It's going to be great. Yeah, you've talked about Lorca's positioning around fascism and like the creative kind of diving into some archetypes that live in that experience. Right now, we are all living in a moment of just global upheaval and unrest and militarism. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the role of art and theater. If you have any thoughts on what you see in this moment right now, theatrically.
Yeah, it's just a great question. Like, obviously, the state of the world and what is happening is really disturbing, and it's like looks like a nightmare. It sounds like a nightmare. What is happening? I myself, as you mentioned, I witnessed a revolution and experienced an ideological fundamentalist regime back home, back in late 70s. And that have had a profound impact on my political and philosophical view as a theater artist, and has raised some major questions for me, like, over the years as a theater artist. And some of those, like, question has been manifested, has been appeared in in most of my productions. Yeah, as I said, witnessing that bloody revolution, that ideological regime, that the sacrifice, like, the lives of thousands of Iranians, that created this big question in my head. For example, does a person, for example, need one exclusive identity? Because this is somehow like, when it comes to the revolution in Iran, it was all about identity. Because it was a religious, revolution. So they were talking about their Islamic, that Muslim identity. Then, that was my question. That question has started from that point. Does a person need an exclusive identity? Why are we passionately attached to our birthplace, ethnicities, religious or national identities? This question has always like been with me. Even we have identities that even just we inherited them and not chosen them. That's a big question for me. For example, another question is like, what makes someone your enemy? Right now, look at the Ukraine situation. Who is the enemy? Like, why? Like, what is this? All of a sudden, a nation become your enemy, and who creates that enemy? What does it mean to fight or die for one's religious or political ideology? What is that? As you say, like, there's a lot of question. As an artist, I don't have an answer. I refuse to prescribe or have a prescription for humanity and say, this is the way of you have to just, live. This is my way of, this is my prescription for humanity. I don't have that one. As an artist, when I see this violence, this historical cycle of war and intolerance and violence is happening, I have all these questions, and I don't have a clear answer for any of them. But I allow myself as an artist to ask the questions. Right. that's my position with what is happening around the world, which is very, as I said, disturbing. It is look like a nightmare, and I'm not sure, how long, humanity will continue like this. Sometimes, people ask me, if I believe in humanity in the future. I said, look, to be honest, in the short term, I'm not an optimist. I don't think so. In the long term, maybe 300-400 years down the road, maybe something positive happened. But in short term, I'm a little bit disappointed. I refuse to give false hope to, as a theater artist. That's another thing I want to say. I refuse to give false hope to people, to my audience. Oh, there's going to be beautiful things are going to change. Oh, yes, I trust humanity. But my understanding, what I'm trying to say, as long as humanity insists in its stupidity, I don't think that we will see a bright light at the end of the tunnel pretty soon. We have a long way to go as humanity. Sorry, that couldn't be very positive.
No. You're not here to give false hope, as you said. And those questions that you asked are so beautiful.
Yes, we just question them. I think that's the best thing is why are you just subscribing to something and not morally question everything?
That's right. It comes in exactly, was talking about the House of Bernarda Alba, a big question, what is this? Because genuinely, Bernarda is not a fascist. She loves her daughter. She loves him, but she thinks that's the right thing to do. And then we say, okay, what is this? What is this with that concept of honor, family honor? Where it's coming from? Again, is associated with those rotten traditions of the past. What is this? Why a mother could, instead of having an answer at the end, the question of why a mother could do this to her loved ones, to her daughters. Why? What is this? And I think that question, it's the most important one. Instead of having something, a statement at the end, for example, a pedestrian way, she's a fascist. It's not going to help us. It's not. I think the audience is what is it? Am I treating my child like that? Am I treating other, not just my child, other, the way people treat, the LGBT community, the gay and lesbian, what is this coming, where is coming from? Yeah. Where this, attitude is coming from? So I think that the question, it's important, is it rooted in our traditions? The decade traditions, what is that? And I think that's it. Instead of having a prescription or answer for everything, question and let the audience go with that question and think about it, and perhaps something may happen.
It reminds me, there's a Bell Hooks quote where she says, "Without justice, there can be no love," which is just.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But you're saying, this mother's love can turn into this violence. Yeah. Where's the justice in that? And then, therefore, where's truly the love in that? However you want to define love.
That's exactly. Yes, that's very true. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, we can't wait to see this production.
Oh, my God.
Excited.
And speaking about questions, every episode we ask our current guest to post a question to the next guest, so we can keep the conversation going. Right. We wanted to ask you if you could ask a question to our next guest, who is an artist based in the Americas. What would you ask them?
If you're a theater artist, why you have chosen theater? Why not film? And what makes this art form so unique to you or for you?
That's a great question. I can't wait to ask it. If you want to hear the answer, you can listen to the next episode and you'll hear someone respond to that.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to hear that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for speaking to us. This was so great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you to you and Aluna Theatre for all the great work you've been doing. And thank you. Thank you for everything. All the best. And we'll see you soon somewhere.
See you at the theater.
The House of Bernarda Alba by Federico Garcia Lorca is on stage from April 6th to the 24th at Buddies and Bad Times Theater. Directed by Soheil Parsa and starring Beatriz Pisano as Bernarda.
The theater will have a seating capacity of less than 50%, ranging from 40 to 80 available seats per performance. So you can choose which performance is best for you. Links for more information and to purchase tickets will be in the show notes.
We hope to see you there.
We are speaking to you from the shores of this beautiful Zagaigan, known to some as Lake Ontario, in Toronto, or Dagarondo. This is the ancestral territory of the Haudenosaunee or Longhouse Confederacy, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Wendat, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. This land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum and Treaty 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase.
At Aluna, we remember that people can begin to heal when they are hurt. We are committed to artful participation in disagreements. We are committed to unsettling ourselves towards connection, respect, and justice for all people who now live in the city, which has been a meeting place since time immemorial.
Radio Aluna Theatre is produced by Aluna Theatre with support from the Toronto Arts Council, the Ontario Arts Council, the Canada Council for the Arts, the Department of Canadian Heritage, and TD Bank.
Aluna Theatre is Beatriz Pisano and Trevor Shelness. Radio Aluna Theatre is produced by Mónica Garrido and Camila Díaz Varela. For more about Aluna Theatre, visit us at alunatheatre.ca, follow at Aluna Theatre on Twitter or Instagram, or like us on Facebook.
Miigwech and Nyawangoa.